At this point, we've created a service that makes HTTP calls to a web API, and we've displayed that data on the tournament screen. When we did the last example, we used regular promises, which we can see here for the getTournaments method. Now let's look at a similar example, but this time we'll use RxJS, which has become the standard for working with HTTP in Angular 2 apps. The first thing I'll do is I want to come in here and add a property for current tournament. We'll just set it equal to an empty object. Right now we have this getTournaments method, which just goes out and makes a lightweight call to get the list of tournaments. What we want to have is another method called getTournamentData. And for this method, we're going to pass in a tournament ID. And for the given tournament ID, we want to go out and get all the data for that tournament, all the games, the schedule information, the team list, the standings. And when we retrieve it, we're going to save it in this current tourney variable. This time, the code looks slightly different. We'll say return this.http.get, so that http.get looks actually the same. Then we'll come in and say this.base URL, tournaments data, and then we need to give it a specific tournament ID. That's that goode we saw earlier on the Firebase console. We need to add the .json extension. Then I'm going to say .map response. And the first thing is we want to save the current tournament with the data that comes back. And then we want to return it. Now, depending on your editor, you may or may not be getting a red squiggle on the map method right here. That's part of RxJS. Let's make sure we import it. I'm actually going to add 2 import statements to just import the entire RxJS library. I'm also going to import the observable. And I'm going to import the observable because I just want to be a little bit more explicit on the definition of this method, that it is returning an observable of any. That's what's going to allow us to use some of these methods like subscribe. Now let's actually go utilize this method on one of the pages. We'll go to the teams page, and let's add nav params to the import, and make sure we inject it. Let's also make sure we're injecting the Elite API service. And let's make sure we inject that too. Now we don't need these hard-coded teams anymore. Let's just make teams an empty array. Now let's add an ion view loaded method. And then this method is where we want to actually make the call to the API. So we have a variable for the selected tournament. This is the tournament that actually got passed in as a navigation parameter. Now we can use the subscribe method of RxJS. We'll just say this.teams equals data.teams. Now let's go run our app. We'll go into the tournaments page, and I'll select this last one, March Madness. And what we can see here is that instead of just 3 or 4 hard-coded teams, we actually made a call out to the web API, and now we have a huge list of teams because we got all that data over HTTP. And we did it using RxJS. RxJS has extra features that you can leverage over normal promises, which has made them popular for Angular 2 apps. Either way, as you've seen here, Ionic 2 makes it quite easy to work with HTTP with your preferred mechanism, either promises or RxJS.